Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into Lesson 35, Separating Main Ideas from Evidence. If you've ever had to tackle a dense academic text or a heavy jargon-filled report, you know it's basically a survival skill to be able to dissect that material without completely losing your mind. That is exactly the toolkit we're building today.
Let me ask you this. Have you ever read an entire page of a textbook or a massive research paper, finally gotten to the bottom, and realized you didn't absorb a single word? I mean, your eyes were definitely moving across the page, but your brain was just completely lost in the weeds. Well, look, don't sweat it. We have all been there. It's an incredibly common kind of reading paralysis, brought on by an absolute avalanche of information.
The real culprit here? Information overload. See, we get so wrapped up in the evidence, the examples, the endless data points, that we totally miss the core message. Let's be real, academic writers love to use 10 words when 2 would do just fine. They wrap their main points in these incredibly thick layers of explanations, definitions, and statistics. And hey, while that's necessary for building a solid argument, as a reader, you've got to learn how to strip all that fluff away so you can find the actual substance.
So here is our roadmap for today's teardown. We'll start with spotting the main idea, move on to what evidence actually does, learn how to read the signposts, and finally, we'll put it all into practice. Let's get to it.
First up, Section 1, Spotting the Main Idea. This right here is your absolute starting point. Before you even think about memorizing facts or pulling statistics from a text, you absolutely have to identify that core message. So, what is the main idea exactly? Well, by definition, it's the most important thing the author wants to communicate. It's the overarching stance that takes the entire text into account. But honestly, the really crucial thing to remember is what the main idea is not. It's never just a specific detail. It's not some fun little anecdote, and it's definitely not a secondary argument. It's the big picture, the ultimate takeaway the author wants you to leave with.
To make this stick, think about it like a building, or even better, human anatomy. The main idea, that is your skeleton. It's the absolute foundation. If you yank that skeleton out, the whole thing just collapses into a pile, right? Now compare that to the evidence. The evidence is the muscle. It's the walls of the building. It gives the argument shape, power, and fleshes everything out. But, and this is key, without that foundational skeleton of a main idea, all that muscle has literally nothing to attach to. So your primary job as a reader is to go in and find that skeleton first.
Moving on to Section 2. What does evidence actually do?
All right, so once we know we're hunting for the main idea, we have to figure out what all those other sentences are doing on the page. I mean, why did the author even include them? Well, every single piece of supporting evidence has a very specific job. Writers use these sentences to explain why something happened, or to describe what it looks like. They might be giving reasons for a phenomenon, throwing in hard facts, providing concrete examples, or just defining a really complex term. So, whenever you're reading a sentence that isn't the main idea, you can bet it's doing one of these 6 things. It's the muscle doing the heavy lifting for that skeleton.
Actually, in academic reading courses, students are literally trained to identify these specific goals. They look at worksheets just like this one, where they read paragraphs and have to actively write down if a sentence is explaining, describing, or giving facts. And honestly, this is exactly the kind of active reading you should be doing in your head anyway. Every time you read a sentence, just ask yourself, okay, what's the goal here? Is this the main point, or is the author just giving me an example?
Which brings us to Section 3, Reading the Signposts.
Now, you might be thinking, okay, this sounds amazing in theory, but how do I actually spot the difference when I'm speed reading for a deadline? Well, the secret is looking for what academics call signposting language. Signposts are exactly what they sound like. They are literal neon signs left behind by the author screaming, hey, over here, I'm just giving you evidence right now. They're basically your cheat codes for reading comprehension. Once you learn to spot them, you can instantly categorize whether you're reading a core foundational argument or just a supporting detail that, frankly, you could probably skim if you're in a rush.
It's actually super easy to categorize these signposts into a handy mental reference table. For instance, if an author is about to drop an example, you'll see phrases like, for instance, such as, or let's take X as an example. If they're defining something, look out for X is the term for, what is meant by, or can be defined as. And if they're gearing up for a long explanation, they'll use signposts like, in other words, let me clarify, or to put it another way. The second, and I mean the literal second you see these phrases, your brain needs to immediately recognize, okay, this is evidence, this is the muscle. Let me just make sure I already have the skeleton.
Let's wrap things up with Section 4, Putting it into practice.
Theory is great and all, but let's actually see how this works in the wild with a live teardown of a seriously dense academic paragraph. Take a look at this excerpt from a politics textbook. It reads, "Voting is a mechanism for making collective decisions. Determining this supposedly objective preference is extremely difficult. This is due to the mathematical problem known as the arrow impossibility theorem, which asserts that when a group of people are asked to make one choice, it is impossible to conclude. Let us see an example from Table 11.1. Okay, wow. Did you notice how fast your brain just wants to tap out there? We jump from voting straight into some intense mathematical problem called the arrow impossibility theorem, and boom, suddenly we're being told to look at a table. It is incredibly easy to just get swallowed up in the math and the jargon.
But let's use our new toolkit. Let's strip away the fluff. What is the author actually doing here? The phrase mechanism for making collective decisions, that's just a definition. The whole chunk about the arrow impossibility theorem, that's purely an explanation of why something is difficult. And let us see an example from Table 11.1 is, you guessed it, clearly flagged by the signpost word example. So, when we strip away the definition, the explanation, and the math, what are we actually left with? Just the skeleton. The main idea of this entire intimidating paragraph is literally just one sentence. Determining this supposedly objective preference is extremely difficult. That's it. Everything else is just muscle added to support that single claim.
And that perfectly wraps up our explainer for today. We've seen firsthand how easy it is to get completely overwhelmed, but also how incredibly powerful it is to separate that skeletal main idea from the muscular evidence. So I'll leave you with this thought. Next time you sit down with a dense article, a 50-page report, or a textbook chapter, are you going to let yourself get lost in that overwhelming tide of evidence? Or will you use your signposts, strip away the fluff, and confidently find the foundation? The choice is yours, but I can promise you, your sanity and your reading efficiency completely depend on it. Catch you next time.